Good evening. I will call this special meeting of the Oak Ridge City Council to order so that we can hear the budget presentation from City Manager Jack Suggs. I want to first thank everybody for their attendance tonight and their interest, but I also want to thank the city staff for their hard work over the last several months under difficult circumstances getting us to where we are today. As well as all of my colleagues on City Council who have worked extremely hard in dealing with budget issues, with compensation formula, with zoning issues and other things that keep moving the city forward. And I would be remiss to say, if I didn't mention the headline story, which was not about Oak Ridge, but I hope that there will be one soon in our local paper that was printed by the Knoxville News Sentinel about the latest data from the Tennessee State Data Center that came from the Boyd Center of Business and Economic Research. And when you go into the article, you will find out that based on the current projections and data that the July 2022, not today, but July 2022 population in Oak Ridge was estimated to be 32,614. My guess is when they do the next analysis of data, we will be closer to probably 34,000. I mention that just because first of all, it has an impact on what the city's doing and the services that we have to provide and the services we have to increase and upgrade, as we move forward, but also the hard work of everybody involved that has got us to this point. And I'll let others go back and do the historical review to see when was the last time that the city of Oak Ridge or the secret city had a population of 33,000. With that, Mr. Suggs, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. It's my pleasure to present to you the budget or the proposed budget for FY24. We'll be passing those copies out to you at the end of this presentation. I have a belief sometimes that we just need to get things done. So I'm going to follow an old procedure called bottom line up front, tell you what's going on, and then we're going to spend a few minutes talking about how we got there. So the bottom line for the employees is I'm going to recommend a 7% across the board increase for city employees. I believe that the 7% has been justified when our comparison to the utilities. And in my research, I believe that that will make our city salaries competitive with the cities around us. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually about where we need to be if you look at the individual salaries. Additionally, we're going to be implementing a compensation plan update for specific people inside of the organization, those positions that are well below 7% below the average, so that with this adjustment, they'll be paid about what they need to be paid. In accomplishing that, we will have recommendation for no property tax increase, and further, there'll be no increase in allocation of sales tax from the from the federal projects above what we did last year. In other words, we're not making this up by adding sales tax from one source, one-time income. We're going to be looking at a significant investment in capital assets, which we'll be talking about primarily from the fund, the cash balance fund. And unfortunately, that we will be looking at some utility rate increases, and I've included information about which utilities and the amounts as part of the presentation. So with that as the beginning, that is our bottom line up front, let's proceed through and see how we got there. First of all, I'd like to say that it takes a team to accomplish things. This team is obviously led by the City Council, who provides vision and leadership for the community. City Manager Mark Watson was the city manager until May 8th when he retired and provided leadership for the staff. We have a senior staff consisting of the deputy city manager and 10 department heads, and we have 412 full-time equivalent employees. Those employees provide a range of services that sometimes is difficult to comprehend. When I'm touring people through the warehouse at times, I would say this warehouse has everything from parts for bulldozers to IV kits for the fire department. It's a wide range of services that we provide using a lot of specialties. I think it's appropriate to take a minute and talk about what we've accomplished in the last year. Since the July figure that the mayor mentioned, we have overseen the completion of 105 new single-family homes, and additionally, we built 238 units in multifamily facilities. We built 41,400 square feet of commercial and industrial space, and we issued over 5,000 permits for improvements and other things that were done to people's homes and businesses. That's a lot of growth, and it's a lot of movement. And if you dig down just one layer deeper, it also means that we've had new sewer types, new water taps, we've had new electric services for all of those facilities. And frankly, we've accomplished that very well. And it means new citizens. We've had an increase in emergency services, we've had an increase in our demand on leisure services, and of course our schools have seen increased enrollment. We've also programmed expansions for new industrial customers. And one of the things which I believe it's time to recognize now that officially the pandemic has been declared over is that we survived a pandemic without once ever failing to provide the services our people depended on. They always had clean water. The sewer systems worked. When they called 911, the police and the fire, the people were there for them. And I think that was quite an accomplishment that needs to be recognized. In looking at accomplishments, there are so many things that we've done that I'm not going to read the full list. But I would point out that after multi-year work, we managed to award the contract for the new water plant. We have a major upgrade of water lines going on now due to the American Recovery Act plan. We've made great progress on the Oak Ridge General Aviation Airport. We've got future plans for things like a new all-inclusive playground, something we'd always hoped for. We finished the Blankenship field renovation program, and by the way, received a clean audit from the state for that program within the last few days. And we went live with Kayenta. We literally jumped 30 years or more into the future from where we were software-wise. We completed standardization of bylaws and procedures for 17 boards and commissions. I wouldn't say herding cats, but it did cross my mind that we got that done. We implemented the TDOT grant for the Oak Ridge Reservation Community Alliance. Together with our friends in Anderson County, we reconstructed the Oak Ridge Fire Tower, the training tower, and put it back in operation. We purchased a new fire truck. We conducted an in-depth in-house review of many of the employees' salaries, and we implemented significant improvements to the pay plan. We designed and bid a renovation for the Civic Center with new conference capabilities. And from our police department, they provided us a 17% decline in Group A offenses this year. You think about it, that's a huge improvement from our police department. And the animal shelter released 98.24% of all animals through adoption and other means. And we talk about a no-kill shelter. A no-kill shelter is 90%. So we far exceeded what was considered a no-kill shelter and did a great job with that animal shelter. And finally, we survived a sophisticated malware attack. We responded properly, we restored our services, we worked to increase security. And something I'm particularly proud of, I think we did a good job of keeping our citizens informed, and we worked very hard to make sure that the innocent didn't suffer for the crimes of the guilty. Looking forward at this budget process, the budget process began in February of this year. There were regular meetings with the Budget and Finance Committee and budget planning meetings between the department directors, the city manager, and myself. I took responsibility on April 8th, and I've had the pleasure of working closely with the finance director and budget and finance, hopefully bringing a responsive proposal for you to consider. The budget this year cannot be considered without recognizing the City Council Compensation Committee. To quote the chairman of that committee, we have to realize that a fire truck just doesn't drive itself. I got permission to use that quote. That's been one of our touchstones for this budget development, to make sure that we recognize the work they did and that we made their thoughts a reality. If we look at what happened with that individual committee, they adopted policies, or they led to the development of policies that extended longevity balance benefits, that adjusted our leave accrual rates, and improved the minimum wages that we were paying to employees. This year's proposed budget furthers that vision by providing further funds for specialized wage increase, the 7% across the board wage increase, and funding for merit-based increases as well. The budget has 4 specific objectives. Number 1, to maintain current service levels. Number 2, to recognize the growth needs of the city staff while still limiting the growth of government. Number 3, to use our unrestricted fund balance in an appropriate manner. And 4, to continue the support of our utility infrastructure. Also, we're working to continue many of our multi-year projects. Those include the Oak Ridge Water Plant, the airport, the activities of the land bank on Wilson Street, and implementing all of the grant-funded proposals we have. We will, of course, continue to support the activities of the Industrial Development Board as they move forward while maintaining our long-term facilities such as roofs. In preparing the budget, we have to make assumptions. Those assumptions are based on good data, and hopefully the data will prove true to us. The first of those involves inflation. What you're looking at is the less-known brother of the CPI called the Producer's Price Index, which focuses more on the activities the city involved with. And you'll see that in mid-year, there was a tremendous spike to nearly 12% on a monthly basis. But the inflation is toned down now, and we are making the assumption that although it will continue, it'll continue at normal levels, and that we won't be dealing with a 10% inflation rate. We're also assuming that the competition for qualified, effective workforce will continue. If you look at Anderson County unemployment over the last year, you'll see that it hovers around 3%. We believe that's probably appropriate, and therefore we're not expecting to suddenly see a wash of unemployed qualified people, and we're going to have to compete for those folks. We are assuming that the supply chain issues will continue to ease and that we'll be able to move forward with our projects, but with a note of caution that we are still having trouble hiring people such as architects and engineers to do our work. When you talk to an architect and they say, "I'd love to do it, can't," you know you're in a tight environment. So we're dealing with that. The next budget assumption has to do with sales tax in Anderson and Roane County. We're assuming that the sales tax will basically remain flat. On this graph, the bottom line is the Roane County sales tax all the way from FY03 to FY23. The blue is Anderson County, and the gray is the combined total. And what you'll see is over the last couple of years, this sales taxes have plateaued. We believe that's associated with the federal project and the fact that they're basically running at full speed. They're not going to be able to go faster than this. And over the next couple of years, this sales tax is expected to fall as that project reaches completion. Because of that, we've taken the sales tax pre-project and projected that with a reasonable growth, but we have not programmed in that excess one-time sales tax to avoid some kind of crisis in the future when it goes away. The good news that we're assuming will continue is that property tax values are increasing and that growth is continuing. This shows Anderson and Roane County taxes between 2022 and 2023. And you'll see there's been an increase of 4.3% in assessed growth. That translates to a revenue which we can program over $900,000 in additional taxes this year. The additional taxes, by the way, includes an adjustment because we have people who are appealing their taxes and sometimes win, so we're being conservative on that, not using the raw number. There are some significant uncertainties as we look forward into next year. The first one I've already mentioned is that sales tax may have plateaued and may decrease as the UPF finishes up. We've attempted to moderate that risk by not programming in UPF funds into continuing funds for the city. The next challenge will be the end of the NNSA contract for fire protection, which supports our Fire Station 4. That will result in a couple of years of a hit of $1.5 million on the general fund. And we'll talk later about how we're going to moderate that impact by use of our free resources. Of course, you have the ongoing concern about inflation and demand, but we don't believe that's significant, but it is out there. Finally, I'm going to mention the police department specifically. The state is funding school resource officers for schools across the state of Tennessee, and that's a great thing. We're proud of it. But there is a limited pool of experienced, qualified personnel, and we feel like with the demand that that puts on our law enforcement, you may see wage pressure in this area. The details of that agreement, according to the school superintendent, are not yet well defined, and we're working very hard to make sure that Oak Ridge is recognized as a municipal school system with a municipal police force. Finally, there are some growth-related capital costs, and although they're not being accounted for this year, we can all look into the future not too far and know that the schools will be looking for another school building. There are a great deal of physical notes here, and I'll run through them quickly. First of all, as noted, staff has program utilizing the sales tax at the same rate as last year, avoiding the use of one-time money. Property sales tax rate remains at 2.3136 per $100 of value, and as noted, that will result in over $900,000 because of growth. Allocations to the school system are budgeted at the same level as last year, a combined capital and contributions approaching $16 million. Unfortunately, water and wastewater rates are going to have to be increased. This is a requirement that was put on us by the state revolving loan fund, and that we needed to produce $1.5 million of extra revenue. We are programming a 8.4% for water rates effective October 2023, and a second rate increase of 8.4% for wastewater in October 2024, deliberately spreading those out so to decrease the impact on our customers. The electric rates will also need to be adjusted this year. We're anticipating a 2.3% rate increase in the fall of 2023, probably October. The electric rate increases have two primary drivers. First, since it began, the TVA issued a pandemic credit to the city of Oak Ridge to offset the cost and loss of revenue caused by the pandemic, and we have made use of those funds. That fund is going to end. And secondly, we've had inflation that have not been accounted for in our rates, and together those represent 2.3%. You will see when you get into the details of the budget that there are multiple contracts that have a CPI adjustment. Those have all been put into place. The one that stands out the most is a very large increase in our mowing cost of $389,000. Now, balancing all that gloom, there is a little good news. Number one, we received a state grant for police radios at $1.49 million. We're very excited about that. And further, due to a settlement with Monsanto, we have $1.3 million sitting in the bank looking at stormwater improvements. So those were not all together unexpected, but very pleasantly on the right side of things. We're going to change just for a minute about significant changes to the budget, and the first one we'll talk about is personnel makeup. As mentioned, we worked very closely, very hard to ensure that each position I'm recommending to you is a needed position that will improve service to our community. The first is a police dispatcher. Training requirements, along with people wanting to take leave, have resulted in us being short on police dispatchers. We're wanting to add one additional police dispatcher to provide basically a floater for the police department to allow those training needs to take place in vacations. Secondly, we're looking at a animal shelter adoption coordinator and volunteer coordinator to help out at the animal shelter in working with the fine people down there and maintaining their status. The city court clerk will be moved from a half-time to full-time position. That's primarily related to them having to redesign their software to get off of our old computer system. So they'll be implementing a new software system. We feel like the extra help will be needed to do that. The electric department is bringing on 5 meter readers. Meter reading was brought in-house last year, but the number of meter readers was not added to the budget. So the 4 of those is that, and 1 is related to growth. We're requesting 1 additional information services network administrator, and although we haven't budgeted for it, I believe that the savings in our consulting costs for network will probably easily pay for this, but we are asking for that position. And finally, we have 1 administrative position that we're going to be adding or upgrading to an accountant. As mentioned before, we are looking at an across-the-board rate increase and then the step increase. The one-time bonuses that were available to directors last year remain available this year. Those have to be funded from the department's budgets. We will be presenting information to you in the not-too-distant future, probably in second reading, to do a realignment of positions and scale according with the plan that we've talked about. These other costs are also wrapped in. Health insurance are budgeted for a 5% increase. TCRS will go up 9%, and then those other things. If we look at the most significant changes to the budgets this year, these are listed here. We talked about compensation, we talked about mowing. Utility costs are estimated to go up about 6%. Street lights and traffic signals, because of maintenance and replacement issues, are going to go up about 8.6%. Commodity costs, just general commodities, are estimated to go up 9% over last year. And then as a special item, the Convention and Visitor Bureau, who talked to you at a work session about wanting to increase their budget, this budget does recognize their increase in budget they requested financially. It does not dedicate any particular revenue stream to them. Event funding has been cut this year by $53,000. We can talk about that later if you like. And the demolition budget has been cut by $50,000. We had $100,000 for demolishing old homes and, the properties that have become worn out. With the rise in property values, people are buying those houses and rehabbing them, and we haven't spent any money in the last 2 years. I'm not taking that to zero, but I'm recommending taking it down to $50,000, which will still do a couple of houses if something turns up. We don't want to be looking at a house that needs demolished and not have the money. So how does this balance out? If we look at the increase in cost, general fund activities are going up $2.9 million, and revenues are going up a total of $2.85 million. So we're going to have a deficit of $58,000. But what I'm going to show you in a minute is that we're putting a lot of money into capital funds this year, and that money, that $58,000, we're going to take out of fund balance, but it will be used for one-time expenses. I want to talk for a second about the NNSA fire contract in particular. The fire contract pays us $1.5 million per year for the operation of Fire Station Number 4. Legitimately, the NNSA no longer has a need for that fire department because the property around K-25 has been privatized. The city maintains a need for it because we have the preserve and other customers in that area who need fast, responsive fire protection. So we're going to need to keep that fire station open. We want to prepare the city for the possible absorption of that $1.5 million without looking at a huge tax increase all at once. So you'll be seeing a resolution to set aside, to reserve $3 million of our general fund balance for a transition period. In the first year, we would pay up to $1.2 million out of that transition fund to offset the cost of the fire station. The second year, we would pay $900,000, and so on in $300,000 increments, so that that tax increase, should it become necessary, will be absorbed over a 5-year period and not hit us all at once. The good news is that we have a lot of growth coming, and a lot of growth is continuing on the West End. Should we get into this plan and discover that our growth makes this plan unnecessary, it's simply a matter of the council passing a second resolution to free those funds up for some kind of other capital use. We're going to talk a little bit about capital investment before I close. We have a generous fund balance at this point. There are a lot of reasons to maintain a capital investment. There are also a lot of reasons, remember, to turn off your phone. I apologize for that. Anyway, some of the reasons that it's great to have a good fund balance is it helps us maintain a financial excellence in the end of our bond ratings. We have a AA+ bond rating, and that didn't come on the heels of not having a nice fund balance. Secondly, in this case, it allows us to invest in our city facilities and infrastructure. We're using it to help the NSA funding, and it maintains flexibility in case things change in the future. We are going to recommend careful use of that fund balance in this budget. As a reminder, the fund balance is increased primarily due to one-time sales tax increases. And the ideas that will be presented to you in the budget, including rehabilitating the Badger building or the Recording for the Blind building for city use. We hope to make that into both a permanent home for the Convention and Visitors Bureau and offices for our Recreation and Parks Department. That will free up programmatic space at the Scarborough Center, which is currently being used for those offices. We're looking at funding the Civic Center expansion, an item that we'll be talking about later this month as we examine those bids. We'll be looking at investing some money in this building, trying to bring it out of the 1960s and make it a place that our citizens can be proud of, instead of one where we hope the wallpaper doesn't come free while you're walking around giving a tour. We're going to be looking at installing a handicap ramp in the front of our building so that our citizens who rely on wheelchairs will be able to access these offices or these meetings without having to hope that someone's in their office in the back of the building. There are several other things, including, perhaps most significantly, a $500,000 infusion into the State Street Fund, which is intended to kickstart the rehabilitation of our pavement that we talked about in a work session a few weeks ago. Hopefully this can be the first step in getting us on the path to getting where we need to be in terms of our pavement. The last slide I wanted to say is it takes a team to prepare a budget. And I've realized this throughout my career, but this year is the year it became very clear that it takes a team. The process this year was exceptionally challenging due, first of all, to the new Kayenta software. Everyone was dealing with numbers that were unusual to them in a system they didn't know, and we were working through that. And just as we were getting used to it, we had a malware attack that literally threw our computer system on the floor. So thank you is never fully inclusive, but this year it seems especially inadequate when I think about all the people who put those systems together so we could get our budget out. In particular, I'll mention Janice McGinnis and her finance department, Amy Fitzgerald and her IT department. Personally, I'd like to thank Kendall Moore, who has stepped up as the interim assistant to the city manager and taken a lot off of my plate so that I can do a better job serving you. And of course, the executive assistant, Mackenzie Hetrick, who puts all this together for us. And I will not close without saying thank you to the city council and the public for your support and the support of the public through what was really a challenging spring of 2023. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation, and we'll, except for questions, we'll be happy to pass out the budget at this point.
I'll just make one statement. I don't know that I have any questions. I'll look forward to going through the budget, but this is, in my years on city council, this is one of the most comprehensive budget presentations that I've heard. This budget, it seems to me, due to everything that you've pointed out and the hard work, is creative. Obviously, it's balanced, but it's also forward-looking and forward-leaning. And I think that is vitally important to us as the city continues to grow. And that's why I wanted to mention the projections in terms of future growth of the city. And while that presents challenges, that's a great thing. Yes. But we need to be very clear-eyed about what it's going to take as we continue to move forward, both in terms of services to our citizens, but also in providing them the utilities and infrastructure that they not only expect, but what they deserve. So I want to thank you and all the staff again.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Smith.
Yeah, I'm very pleased. We discussed this in the Budget and Finance Committee. We didn't know how it was going to come out, but I'm very pleased to see that our analysis has shown that the revenues that we can expect to continue are sufficient to pay for some of the things that have been on our plate as things we knew we needed to do, but we weren't sure we could afford it. But these last few years have been crazy, and we couldn't be sure how much revenue we could expect to continue year to year. But the fact that we now have a good handle on that, and it allows us to do things like that 7% increase in the pay plan is huge. I really appreciate staff's efforts in doing that analysis and pulling this together. So.
Mr. Hammond.
Just want to quickly echo everything's been said, down to the level of how responsive this budget is to concerns that have been raised and incorporating that into ways to move forward. I mean, there are several examples that I could use, but one that kind of stood out in particular was even the animal shelter coordinating staff. I remember that was a part of that conversation, and to go back and incorporate that as part of the budget moving forward really is a shining example of what the budget represents. So I was pleased to see that. Hats off to you and the team. That's absolutely exceptional in its responsiveness to needs and concerns that have just come up over the course of the year. So just thank you so much for that.
Mr. Dodson.
Jack, I appreciate how we've been responsive. I really appreciate the mayor appointing Mr. Hammond, Mr. Hope, and myself to the Compensation Committee, and us looking at what we needed to do with personnel, not just capital improvements, not just fire trucks, if you will, but also the people who make up our town and the workforce that we have, and we needed to actually look out and look forward to helping those people more so this year, and I really appreciate you including that as an integral part of this budget presentation.
Mr. Hensley.
Yeah, just in the background, are there any surprises that you think are out there that you really haven't? Like, for instance, the tunnel for the airport and that kind of thing, or I noticed also you did not mention the new fire station. At least maybe I missed it. I was trying to listen very carefully.
No, I didn't mention it, and I apologize. It is on the list, and it's included in the presentation. This year we have funding to do the design portion of that fire station to get it completely designed, and then next year we'll put funding in to get it built. If we're talking about the relocation of Fire Station 2, if that's what we're talking about. And then there's a future fire station located perhaps out on Emory Valley Road or Mountain Lake, but that is several years in the future. We're not quite to the point of considering it yet.
The airport, though, we talked a little bit about how the guy doing the windmills no longer needs the railroad. Does the tunnel option now go away, or are we still in a delay process?
We've been in discussions with Energy Solutions as late as today, actually. I complimented Kendall Moore for helping me with some of this, and Kendall's been talking to Energy Solutions and talking with their lawyers and other folks, the Railroad Authority. We are moving forward with requesting to get that railroad spur abandoned with Energy Solutions blessings. So there will be a tunnel for the main entrance, which again, I think will be a great entrance to the park, but there will not, at this point, we're not trying to find an additional money for a railroad tunnel.
Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, Jack, thanks again. I want to say thanks to Derek and Jim for working with me so closely on the compensation study plan this year. We turned over a lot of different things in that. Appreciate all the department heads coming forward. I'd be remiss if we didn't specifically thank Eric for all the hard work he did. Tremendous amount of work, Eric. We really appreciate that. It really clarified a lot of the stuff we needed to talk about, and it was very important. So I appreciate all the work. There was we put a lot on you in a very short period of time, so we really appreciate that. But just the working relationship we had through that compensation study, and it's going to have to be an ongoing position, whether we put other city council members in the compensation committee in future years. It's going to be an ongoing deal because it's going to be an ongoing presence, like you said, with low employment, with the market shares around us being as much in demand as we are. So it's going to be a challenge for us over the next several years, I'm sure, to continue to work with that and work closely with that. So I appreciate that. Appreciate all the hard work. Very forward thinking this year. Appreciate the budget presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Hensley, you have something else?
Me? Yeah, another thing too that I think about a lot is Carbide Park. You know, it would be nice if the city could get Carbide Park, but there's a lot of money involved in bringing it up to where it needs to be.
Mr. Hammond?
I meant to ask this earlier and I forgot. Absolute stellar presentation. Do you have copies of that? I know we've got the binder.
We'll get those printed and put into your boxes.
Okay,
for
thank you.
This afternoon or tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gleason, you have any closing comments?
Add to the accolades. I mean, it's a fantastic process. Certainly, Ms. Smith did a great job leading the budget and finance through. So now I'll publicly say, great job on this. I think the part that I thought was most impressive as we went through this was the strategic planning process on inbound absorbing costs, right? We see that certainly most publicly in the fire station, but there's other instances of that in the budget where you guys have worked well as a cohesive team to find ways to do long-term offsets, and that's obviously well appreciated. So to Derek's kind of opening comments here, and you're kind of scratching all the itches from both the citizens, but also good stewardship of the funds that we have. It's certainly appreciated.
All right, and what will be the schedule next Monday in terms of, are we doing this on first reading and a public hearing, Madam Clerk?
Yes, there'll be public hearing and first reading next Monday. That meeting's at 7. And then there's 2 other budget-related items that will be on the agenda for that night for first reading.
In a special meeting?
No, it's the normal one of 2 budget meetings.
Okay, all right.
In the
Okay,
original
okay.
calendar. And then the second reading will be June 12th
Right.
at 7, and that's the official public hearing.
But we're doing the meeting, just to be clear, the next meeting, next Monday, will be at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, they're both at 7, yes.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments, council, before we adjourn? Ms. Racker, you got anything? Okay. All right, having accomplished.
Yeah, I was remiss in not saying what a good job this is. This is the best budget presentation I can remember in 11 years on council. And so it's amazing. Thank you.
All right, having
As I said, it was
accomplished
great.
the business for which this meeting was called, we are adjourned. Thank you all.